Yo, Wagwan fam, it's your boy Propaganda, and we are going over our first 40k battle report. So, last weekend we had our first game of 40k, leading our Blood Angels Liberator Assault group against Gallandro and his Astra Militarum Bridgehead Strike. Played a 2,000 point game of Search and Destroy. I had a really good time, and as a first game it was relaxed but still very engaging and competitive at times. So as our first game, we went in with the mindset to learn and just have fun. Winning, although it would be nice, was not the main objective. Getting better at 40k is a bit of a win for us right now. So my goals in 40k is to take out an RTT and then eventually a GT. So I'm just going over the rough battle report and covering the strats I was aiming to set up and the mistakes that were made on my end, just to keep a record of what to improve on for future games. It's always good to learn from your mistakes and blunders, fam. So every game offers a new learning opportunity, and so you should always take advantage of it. If you like this video, fam, drop a sub. Trying to hit 1k this year, and I plan to make more videos breaking down our future games and the learning opportunities that come out of them and all the fun scraps. We're an edutainment channel now, so we aim to educate and entertain. Alright, so I'll bring up our army lists here, and I'll attempt to break down the battle report in a format summarizing each battle round and just covering the main things that happened, including what I was trying to accomplish, what actually happened, and sort of the mistakes and blunders that I noticed. We'll also cover the main highlights and the cool battles, fam, all the good little skirmishes and scraps that we had. Okay, before jumping into the battle report, let's quickly go over our battlefield terrain setup and the overall approach to the mission. So we're playing on the S&D deployment, and the main mission was linchpin, so scoring for holding your objective and capturing the opponent's objective. So we had a pretty interesting terrain setup. Now I'm not too sure if it was part of the WTC or ITC terrain map, but Gallandro has a tournament coming up this weekend, the ValleyCon, so I think it might have been a terrain setup from their tournament organisers, or it could have just been something that Gallandro set up. I didn't actually ask, but it's pretty interesting. Got some pretty good firing lanes right through the centre here, and some quite exposed areas, so a little bit harder for our Blood Angels to find cover. There also wasn't quite enough room for my Land Raider to move around the board and get up center. It had like one lane that it could take, so we had to deploy it in one area. That's what it is, fam. Pull up with the big truck in a little parking lot, there's not always a spot that you can put it. Anyway, I had a rough idea of the mission deck, but just to keep things a bit easier for our cognitive load, our little caveman brain, we just would adjust for secondaries as we went. So our strategy were to capture the two exterior objectives early and establishing some units out there, focusing our battle line on capturing and holding the center board objective with some overwatch support from the tanks. Thought if I could do that, then we could deep strike our remaining units sort of where we needed to do the most killing, or with the shortest route to the enemy deployment, and take that objective to stop them from scoring there as well. Now the score ended at 32 to 29 to Gallandro, and with such a close game, you'll see that some of the blunders that we go over could have been the difference between victory and defeat on this day. But we have plenty of opportunities to make up for that, and we'll slide next time. Alright, now let's jump over and take a look at our deployment. So here's the battlefield with our initial troops deployed, and we'll go over some of the things that we're aiming to achieve with this and some of the mistakes that we also made. So first off, we had our infiltrators holding it down here at our home base. We also had our Land Raider deployed next to them with the two AI squads in there, also just covering that large firing lane down there with the las cannons. So these intercessor homies were tasked with putting some pressure on the mid-board, threatening either by rolling up in the Land Raider and then disembarking and charging. So potential like 10-inch move plus advance from the Land Raider, then disembark 3 and then charge with the assault intercessors, potential 12-inch charge. So you know, you could get definitely right up in that deployment zone if you wanted to. If they had charged that far, we would have had the banditos, or the old bikers down here, to provide additional support on the midboard. The jump intercessors were also set up to put some pressure on the midboard, or they could divert over to this corner objective in the top left. We'll call that the northwest objective. Now they were left a little bit exposed, which we'll talk about shortly. Then we have the Sanguinary Guard and their Smash Captain deployed down over here to threaten this northwest objective as well. Finally, we had our ballista set up here in this between this piece of terrain, watching this firing lane towards the northwest objective, and also this long one down the center of the board. Old mate had his stuff like this. He's got some death core over in those north terrains there. I think that was a little 20-man squad. He also had these Cadians here and these eastern ruins, as well as a Acadian guard squad with the command squad and Ursula Creed. Got the mortar squad in the backfield, just raining down some indirect fire. Got the Taurox and the Chimera mixed mixed up in this picture, but they'll swap around in the next one. So I think there are 10 Kaskin in the Torox, and then 10 Vietnam vets in the Chimera jumping out with their machetes, the Catachan jungle fighters. Following this, we had our infiltrator drops, and now this is where a couple of the blunders come up, so we'll jump straight into the what could have been done better section of the video. So first I dropped these scouts here to screen off some of this part of the board and threaten the Cadians. However, they were out of position to block the Chimera's scout move, which led to a bit of a blunder of having to deploy the other scouts just to compensate for that. I also should have pre-measured the Chimera's move before deploying the scout so aggressively, because come first turn the Chimera is able to just roll up. Okay, jump intercessors. Now they were set up as an expendable unit that were intended to threaten the midboard and also sort of divert over to the northwest objective, as I mentioned earlier. However, they were left a little bit exposed. Had we not blundered the scout deployment earlier, we could have deployed our scouts over this side a little bit closer to screen off this area and protect the jump intercessors from getting ganked in the first turn. Sweet, we roll off and Gallandro gets to start. Then we make our scout move. Our mate moves his ratlings up onto OBJ. Having successfully blocked the Chimera's scout move, we retreat both of our scouts into the southeast ruin here. Old mate had chucked some Gaunt's ghosts up in the corner in the northwest ruin as well. But with that, let's jump into the first battle round. Okay, so there's a bit going on here. Now let me walk you through it. This is the board state after Gallandro had done all of his moves, so I'll just go over that quickly. First off, he swapped the Chimera and the Torox around. No, I swapped them around. So the Chimera rolled straight up here, and then the Vietnam vets jumped out, and with their PTSD they charged into the scouts, at which point we activated our Savage Echoes stratagem, and in the minds of these scouts, fam, they could hear and they would see horrors. It's like akin to losing yourself to the Black Rage. So 1 extra strength, 1 extra attack, coming at the cost of being battle shocked. Just waiting for the fight phase, fam. Just waiting for it. And then next, Gallandro activated one of his stratagems. I think it might have been the stratagem from his Tempest command squad, and they got to drop in 6 inches behind these jumpy boys. He also moved those Deathcore into cover, into the terrains. And with that, I think that was all of his moves for first turn. And then homie just started blasting, fam. So first he shot my scouts with the Chimera, emptied the entire clip into the scout squad in the corner that he wasn't engaged with, and blasted all but 2 of them. I think the mortars also shot at the scouts, just raining some indirect fire on them. Like in a Drake and Kendrick beef that's still ongoing from a year ago, sending indirects, fam. Anyway, next was the Scions, and they just started airing it out against these jump intercessors and completely wiped the squad. So yeah, quite 2 big major blunders on that part. However, when it comes to the fight phase, these scouts have just been sitting down here frothing, the cries of their battle brothers echoing savagely in their minds. The Catachans charge in, and they managed to take out 1 scout, and then the 4 remaining scouts, AP1 on the combat knives, fam, they just completely tabled that whole Catachan squad. Them scouts are the youth man of today, yeah? Always chinged up in that, innit? And with that comes the end of Gallandro's turn. Now we could have picked up these 2 scouts over here to redeploy them. However, we just left them there closer to OBJ. Probably a blunder. And as we mentioned earlier, the JPI were too exposed and that whole unit just got clapped. Okay, so we have a fair bit to cover in this next slide. Now it's my turn. So we had to get the Outriders to move up so they could get out of the way of the Land Raider. Land Raider also moves up. I think it also got a little bit bigger. One of the 5-man intercessor squads disembarks from the Land Raider, ready to make a charge at these ratlings which are no longer on the board. Okay, there they are. The Sandguard and Jump Captain over here in the west quadrant, they moved 12 and then charged into the Tempestus Scions. They slid for the jump intercessors that got smoked earlier. I failed to note this Death Core over here staring directly at the Scions, and so when the Sandguard moved up, they got overwatched. No casualties, thankfully. I think we also scooted our ballistas up just a bit. Now with that, most of our movement was done. Now there's already a blunder. I forgot to move these scouts onto the objective, and so we missed out points there. The mission for this turn was extend battle lines. So 3 points for capturing an objective in no man's land and 5 points if you cap 2. Anyway, at this point in the game, my brain was going through checklist mode, and so after movement comes shooting. So we just started airing it out at anything that we could see, fam. The assault intercessors and the outriders shot at the ratlings, and then the Land Raider finished off the ratling, which left us with no charge target for our assault intercessors, and then we couldn't complete the secondary again, so missed points again. Sandguard engaged the Scion squad and eliminated about 5 of them, which left both of our squads on this objective, so Gallandro ended up netting points at the end of our turn. Now, what else could we have done better? We could have used the Smash Captain's Icon of the Angel ability to get a free dev wound. That's quite army specific and unit specific, so not too much to pass on to you guys, but good for me to know. We also could have used Armor of Contempt on the Overwatch if we wanted to, but we wanted to see what would the average damage be on an Overwatch at the Sandguard from these dev core guys. And so with that, we're on to battle round number 2. Alright, so Gallandro moved these Cadians into cover and then scooted these Cadians out onto the objective. He had picked up the Gaunt's Ghost from last turn and dropped them on top of the northern terrain ruins over here, and that was the most of his movement for that turn. The game sort of transitioned straight into the shooting phase, and so at this point I didn't cut in and rapid ingress my Astra and his homies, so a bit of a blunder there. They had to wait. Then he did a bunch of shooting. I think he shot the mortars at these outriders, either killed it or left it on 1 wound. Then the Taurox shot up this Sandguard squad here and killed 1 as well. And then comes our turn. Alright, so we deep strike in Astaroth and 5 of his homies to back up the scout squad down here and deal with this Chimera. Moved up our Assault Intercessor squad and the Outriders, so they had like a 2-inch charge on these Cadians on the OBJ. Didn't shoot them this time. These 2 scouts moved onto the objective and then they performed a cleanse, netting us some sweet VP. Astaroth eyeing up this 9-inch charge at the Chimera, fam. Probably thinking, nah, that's a bit dumb though. Check it. Just watch. So Brain was just in checklist mode, fam, and so we went into shooting phase. Didn't want to not shoot, so we saw 1 target and we had a line of sight from the ballistas down to these death core here, fam. So we shot them. Blunder. We killed 1 and then we activated their ability, so they get +1 to wound, I think, when they're lower than starting strength. Bit of a blunder. Maybe my opponent should have told me about it. I don't know. Alright, on to some scraps. So the Assault Intercessors charged into these Cadians here, threw some chainswords at them and hacked them up to pieces. But the charge of the match, Astaroth needing to get a 12+ so that we could get into engagement range, well 9+, rolls a 12 on the first roll, giving the unit 1 extra attack, 2 extra strength, and the dev wounds on the charge. You're probably wondering where the Chimera went. It's in the warp now, fam. It's in the warp now. The little unit of Sandguard finished off the Scions here and then consolidated onto the OBJ. Everyone on centerboard just standing out in the open. So at this point, due to me being late, fluffing around with my stupid codec and data sheets, we'd probably been close to playing for about 2 hours now. And so we agreed to make the next battle round, the final battle round, and just wrap up everything there. I can't exactly remember the points tally because Gallandro was keeping score for us, but we had had a blast up until this point, so I thought let's just chuck all of our units on the table and try and clean up as many of the enemies as we can. We also had the intention of sneaking into his home base, trying to wipe out this mortar squad and just get into his home base. Felt if we could end the game in his home field, that would be pretty fun. Just going over the current board state. Up until this point, we had sort of achieved our overall goal of getting as much board control as we could and having a nice little waltz into the enemy deployment here. Now he's still got a lot of units to come, fam. I think there's still like 4 Scions sitting on the tray, just in reserves. And they have a 6-inch deep strike, fam, so remember that. Alright, fam, so battle round 3, the final round. ... So Gallandro moved, Taurox moves up, and them Karskins jump out, fam. 2 Scion drops. Count them, 2 Scion drops. 1 down here in the southeast quadrant, just mean mugging Astaroth and his homies down here. And then we had this second squad, and they're just eyeing up our Ballistas Dreadnought, now into shooting phase. And blundered again, fam. I should have cut in again just so I could rapid ingress one of my unit, but the game was going so smoothly, I was kind of waiting for a break in the phases. So typically in like Yu-Gi-Oh, when I'd play, you would announce when you'd change between phases, and then you'd often ask your opponent if they had a response for many things. But we've learned now that if you've just got something to do, you're just going to have to interject. Alright, so into the shooting phase, these Scions started shooting up this ballista, and with all those melter guns, fam, they got the ballistas down to like 3 wounds. The Karskin here on the center objective started blasting at the Outriders. One dude threw his fucking Vox mine at them and just completely blew up 2 of them. And then some fire was directed at the Assault Intercessors. Just bodies dropping everywhere, fam. That whole Intercessor squad got wiped except for the Sergeant. So the lone Sergeant is standing on the center objective by himself. All of his homies just got shot up around him. And then the Death Company also got blasted, fam. With that came the charge phase. And with the ballistas on 3 wounds, these Scions thought they'd be slick and try and rush him, fam. Cadians also rushed in on the lone Sergeant and started trying to stab him up. Both of their resolve was way too strong. Sergeant clapped back and he took out a couple of the Cadians. Ballista started stomping and he took out a couple of them as well. And with that was the end of Gallandro's turn. So a couple of blunders. I probably could have used the Armor of Contempt on the Deaf Company squad to help them survive a little bit. It was more so I just didn't really want to stretch out the game, so I just left it. And also not rapid ingressing Dante. That was the bigger blunder. It would have been nice to be able to get them on the board a little bit sooner. Alright, so now for what I thought was my final turn. I just thought, fuck it, let's send it. Deep strike in Dante and 3 Sandguard, and then another captain and 3 Sandguard. Dante's objective was to rush the mortar squad, and then the other Sandguard squad was to rush these Cadians and Ursula Creed. I was like, fuck it, let's try to do an epic challenge. Astra, pleased that his battle brothers met a good end in battle, charged himself into these Scions. And then the dopest scrap of all, fam. All this action happening on centerboard. So don't forget, the lone sergeant, he was stood there in a gaggle of Cadians, fuck. Oh, we're not Canadian, eh? And so this gaggle of Cadians surrounding the single sergeant, the Blood Angels captain, saw that it was time to disembark. He took his 5-man squad and they pulled up and saw the smash sergeant surrounded by the ops, and the Cadians knew at this point. But when the captain saw his sergeant homie surrounded by ops, fam, he just lost it. Completely fueled by rage, they charged in on these Cadians. Rewind a little bit, back to the shooting phase. The Land Raider blasted at the whip, blasted their Taurox out, fam. So even if they made it out, they weren't driving home. So if that board set up, that was all quite nice for what I thought was going to be a final turn. However, just after setting up these charges, we thought we could squeeze in one more turn. And at this point, I had already thrown all my cards on the table. Dante and the captain's Sandguard positions were set up to charge, and I didn't really bother about putting them into cover because I thought it would have been fine if the game had ended and they were just out there. However, as usual, fam, we were abandoned by the dice gods, and Dante and the captain both failed their charge. It was over 9 inch, so it wasn't like, you know, there wasn't a big amount of hope that we were going to get it. And so then we get to throwing hands. The rage-fueled captain and the smash sergeant destroyed the Kaskins. I think I was calling them Cadians earlier. The Land Raider had also shot the Taurox off the board. And then Astaroth down here managed to wipe half of the Scion squad. So some blunders for this round. Dante and the Sandguard both failing their charge. We're just left out in the open. And we forgot to do some stompy with the Ballista Shred, but that doesn't really matter. Okay, now into the real final round. I had a feeling we were going to be in a bit of trouble because Gallandro still had 2 Scion squads sitting on his reserve tray. And so we had a feeling that they were just going to drop and start blasting. And so sure enough, 2 Scion squads dropping in 6-inch deep strike right on Dante and the Sandguard's booty. The Death Corps come marching out and decide they want to join the party with their +1 to wound. And then the board just turns into a hail of gunfire and multi-melters, fucking plasma shots, and indirect fire from the Drake team over here in the back. Dante gets clapped. His whole unit gets wiped from these Scions up in the northeast quadrant, shooting down at them, and then also the mortars laying in some indirect fire. The Captain Sandguard squad gets shot up by the Scions down here in the southeast quadrant, just laying out half of the squad there. So the captain and the bannermen were there left over. The Death Corps decide to roll up on the objective and start scrapping out with these assault intercessors and the captain. There's also still like 3 Scions down in the southeast quadrant, but Astaroth butchers them quite quickly. So round 4 kind of all went out the window, fam, suffering heavy casualties. I think we also should have given extra points because Dante's gone. He was our warlord. I can't remember what happens when your warlord dies. Does that give you, your opponent extra points, or does that make your whole army battle shocked? I can't remember. Doubt it's full battle shock though. That'll be pretty brutal. Battle Brothers fallen. We reassessed our options, and at this point it was 32 to 29 in points, and the final mission that we drew, I believe, was no prisoners. So if we were able to wipe a unit off of the board, I think it would have given us enough points to sneak the dub. So the captain and his remaining Sandguard bannerman and Astaroth both charged the Scion squad. The Land Raider pulls up and we just get to swinging. Unfortunately, we just didn't have enough units to deal the necessary damage that we needed to wipe these squads. And so there was a couple of little blunders in this final round. We forgot to re-roll the wounds on the objective for the assault intercessors. That probably could have helped net a couple of extra kills. And we could have used AOC on Dante, but we left them to die. And so with that, fam, it essentially wraps up our first game. Super fun time. It was so good. Actually can't wait till my next game. But in summary, there was a lot to learn. Some of the bigger blunders to learn from was that scout deployment and then the JPI deployment as well. Those two things kind of went hand in hand. Failing to rapid ingress on turn 2 and 3 just left our mobility lacking a bit when it came time to moving and charging in our turn. Shooting the charge targets in turn 1, fam. That blunder was so massive, we could have probably won the game, well, depending on how the other mission draws came, but that would have netted us enough points early game to, you know, sort of start establishing a bit of a lead. We also failed to move the scouts onto the objective in that first turn as well, which we dropped points on too. Some smaller blunders just to go over. Failing to pre-measure for that first turn was pretty bad, and we sort of suffered a little bit from that. Forgetting unit abilities kind of hampered us a little bit. Forgetting to re-roll on the objective for assault intercessors and little things like that. Also movement, just getting overwatched and stuff. Forgot to check little lines of sight to the areas that we were going to move to. I forgot to mention we didn't use Oath of Moment at all, which could have helped pick up a few extra kills. There were opportunities for Armor of Contempt, but I wanted to test some of the unit's survivability against some of these firearms that the Astra Militarum were bringing. Pretty safe to say I should have used it on Dante at the end there. And with that, fam, I think that's pretty much it. If there are any glaring mistakes that stood out to you as a 40k player, please let me know. I'll be very keen to know where you think I could improve and what mistakes I'd made throughout this game. We're still super new and still have heaps to learn, so if you've got any advice, please share it. There are 2 RTTs coming up in May and June, and so I'm thinking about signing up to one of them. I'd like to get in a few more games beforehand, so I'm probably going to make a video about what I do to prep for the tournament. That one probably won't come out for a few weeks because I'll just be filming stuff. Got a few units to finish painting in our army. Also have to sort out our transportation trays and probably get some more dice. But yeah, if you like this video, fam, drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know if you'd like to see more of these battle report analyses. And finally, shout out to our opponent Gallandro and the Hut Club Miniature Wargaming Club for hosting us. And with that, we'll catch you in the next one, fam. Alright, peace.